be tough in 2 minutes, but I'll do my best. So I will say that because of what has happened last week in the retirement announcement of Justice Kennedy, I think the priority and a critical issue here is to protect women's reproductive rights, and we must work hard here, not only nationally, but in the state. And there is no one running in this office for governor who has fought harder, been an advocate, and worked every single day to make sure that women have access to safe and legal abortions, recognize your own privacy, and to prevent any interference with government about women's health care. And I will continue to do that every single day. I'll be putting a plan out of action this week. The second is education for me. It is most important. You heard it changed my life. I am appalled by Governor Sununu's push for his signature piece of legislation on the voucher program. It is wrong for New Hampshire. It takes money from our public schools. It weakens our public schools. I want to strengthen our public schools, and it will raise your property taxes. And last but not least is we will and I will pass the Paid Medical Family Leave Act once and for all, because it's the right thing to do for our families. Thank you.
Thank you. Same question to you, Steve Marchand. What would be your top 2 to 3 issue priorities, and what would you do to advance them?
So there are a whole slew of issues, and Molly mentioned several really important issues. 100% protection of a woman's right to make her own decisions. Delivering the best education in pre-K through 12 in America. Legitimate investments in infrastructure, legitimate investments in how we treat addiction and long-term recovery, and many more. And we'll get into them over the next several minutes. But there are 2 big things that we have to do well in order to maximize the chance of doing all those other things really well. And one of them is how we fund government. I touched on it earlier in my opening remarks, but right now we have a 19th century system, an antiquated system, of how we raise the money to pay for the things that matter most. No state in America relies more on property taxes to fund education and social services and infrastructure than the state of New Hampshire. I audit city, county, and state governments professionally. Been doing it off and on 20 years. I've been a successful mayor of Portsmouth. It's a great community. And I know this state. I got an aunt up in Pittsburgh, and I was born and raised in Manchester. When I tell other folks in my business we're from New Hampshire, they say, that's great. When we want to know what American governance looked like in the 19th century, we come to New Hampshire today. We could do so much better, and it means the state has to take on more of the freight for paying for some of these things, and it means we need additional revenue. And I'm unafraid to say that to you, or to the National Federation of Independent Businesses, or anybody else. That, if you don't do that right, it is hard to do anything else terribly well. And the second also is money. The money we use to pay for the elected officials who then make the decisions on what to do with that money. Public financing of elections is paramount. I traveled to other states. I spent a lot of time on it. I have a specific plan that costs between $4 and $6 million a year. It's less than 0.1% of our operating budget. But it sure as heck will make it a lot better in terms of how we elect the people that spend the other 99.9% of our operating budget each year. There is no other way to get it done. I will lead on that, and we will work until we get it done. So those are 2 big things that undergird everything else we need to do.
Molly, on the topic of immigration, what do you think the governor's role should be in the immigration debate, and what would you do as governor?
First of all, I just want to address this issue, the critical, heartbreaking issue that we must be working at every single day. Every one of us, wherever we are, is to unite the children with their parents. That's what we need to be focusing on. I was at a rally today. It is heartbreaking to hear the stories. It is hard to even talk about this issue. I'm a mother, and when we talk about this with each other, it is hard for tears. And I'm telling you, it happens every single time. And that is just unacceptable. We cannot allow Donald Trump to be treating people in this manner, or his deportation forces. It is unacceptable. It is inhumane. There is no respect. There is no dignity and human rights. And as governor, I will stand up to Donald Trump and say, we do not need your deportation forces here in New Hampshire. They are not welcome.
Same question to you.
So on Wednesday, I said New Hampshire should become a sanctuary state. This is policy. It is personal. I am a first-generation American. My folks came down from Quebec in the 1960s. I grew up on the west side of Manchester. English was the second language of our house. We did not have a high school degree in the home growing up, and neither did most of my neighbors. I have been advocating for years that we need to stand up strong for the positive power of immigration. And I was fearful of the words of Donald Trump 2 years ago when I ran last time. And now I'm fearful because of the deeds of Donald Trump. Believe him when he speaks. He means everything he says and more. These are the stakes. America is in a balance. This country was built on immigration, and I think more than any time in my lifetime. If nobody speaks out with incredible force in favor of immigrants, in favor of the power, the positive power of immigration, it is not clear who will. Because there are people that have hate in their hearts and are looking for a scapegoat, and they are looking to bring America back to another time. They didn't realize America had a lot of immigrants back then too. We should, undocumented immigrants, the 4-point plan involves driver's license, it involves in-state tuition, it involves local law enforcement not needing to listen to any laws that are not required by the federal government to take the pressure off of them, and this 48-hour immigrant stay, this extension to allow them to begin the deportation process, something that is being done with aggression that even Bush 43 didn't do. This is fundamentally making our communities less safe. It will damage our economy. On Wednesday, I stood in front of the statue of Ferdinand Gagnon, a 19th century journalist, an immigrant from Quebec, who fought to expose the discrimination against French-Canadian immigrants at that time. Well, this son of French-Canadian immigrants in the 21st century feels obligated to speak up in the same way. It is the only way that we will keep America, America.